Welcome into UGA Football Live with JC Shelton, where the dogs come to talk. What is up, Dog Nation, and welcome in to the first UGA Football Live with JC Shelton multi-platform production. That's right, we're on our usual audio platforms, wherever you get your podcast, but also on YouTube and our new channel and sports network, the Pulse Sports Network, brought to you by JCS Multimedia Productions. It's great to bring in this aspect of the show and to do it before such a big game. National title, Georgia TCU. What a big game this is going to be. To bring another title back to this town will be incredible. Georgia sports fans know how incredible this will be. So I'm really happy to bring this to you guys. You asked for it. I delivered. Let's do it. We're always going to be streaming on our YouTube channel at the Pulse Network. The Pulse Sports Network. Get on it. TPSN, as some call it. So check it out. Please subscribe and give us a like if you can. We'll get this channel up and running. Gonna have a good show for you guys today. Aaron Murray gonna join the show a little bit later. He'll give us his thoughts and breakdown of the national championship. Gonna hit all the P's and Q's here to get you ready for the game. Let's go Peach Bowl recap first. And oh my gosh, what a game. Like, what an incredible game. I was so anxious, guys, so anxious. I've been telling people I had 10 years off my life after this game, at least, maybe more. I mean, everybody else was watching the game, having a good time. I'm in the back, couldn't sit down, anxious. That's anxiety. My heart was racing the entire time, especially when Ohio State got that first touchdown out of the half. I was like, here we go. I mean, this is it, you know? And then Stetson Bennett and company, along with a few big stops from that Georgia defense, just sealed the deal. And then that missed kick right as midnight hit. How crazy is that? That ball literally landed right as midnight struck. Brought in the new year with a Georgia win. We're 1-0 this season, baby. The only college football team 1-0 in 2023. So let's do it. Let's keep it. Let's get it 2-0. Now let's talk about how Georgia can do it today. So that Rose Bowl, the Peach Bowl, reminded me of that Rose Bowl in 2017 and that win over Oklahoma Georgia had. Overtime win. What an incredible game that was. And I think before this game was the best playoff game ever. This might have taken over. It wasn't an overtime, so that's debatable. But this game really gave me those thoughts. Big comeback win, right? And C.J. Stroud and that passing attack for Ohio State really did its thing for most part of that game. And the running game was slightly better than I thought it was going to be for Ohio State. That offensive line, I thought, played well, especially in the middle and keeping Jalen Carter and that defensive front out of the backfield. Georgia likes to create pressure on the inside, right? They weren't able to as much. We had some sacks from Javon Bullard, linebacking core, and Pop Johnson, Ismail Mondon, and Mykel Williams. But that interior defensive line, Jalen Carter had him a couple of times, it looked like. But C.J. Stroud was good enough, and he played a great game to get out of that pocket, create some passing lanes, and really challenge that Georgia secondary. You can only cover so long, folks, right? I mean, coverage is going to break down. So Georgia was really reeling on its heels in the secondary, but made some key stops in the second half to let Stetson Bennett and company mount that comeback. What a game. Dogs weren't able, I think, to establish a running game as much as they wanted right out of the half, but they had to pass to win, right? But I think that running game ended up complementing pretty well. Georgia averaged a really good rush per carry, and we'll see that in just a second. It's the only time second time Georgia has trailed in the second half. Missouri, remember that one. Georgia trailed the majority of the game, came back and won. Mistakes really hurt the Dogs in the first half, I think. And like I've said before, that seems to be the only thing that can dethrone Georgia is mistakes. Georgia can beat Georgia. Interception, missed field goal in the first. Take those away, it's a different game. Another missed field goal by Jack Podlesny, one in the first, one in the second. Completely uncharacteristic of him. I call him the sniper. The kid is one of the most accurate kickers in the SEC in history. And it was really weird to see him do that, and I hope that's not a trend we see. But he has been really good in the past and following up with his misses with makes. So we'll see if that is a factor on Monday night. But beyond that, I think the defense and the way they stepped up was huge. Kirby Smart and company made the adjustments. They started working. Chris Smith, Javon Bullard, Samael Mondon, Pop Johnson. We've said these guys. Mykel Williams. Each had big games. Injuries kind of threw Mykel into that major role on the defensive line because of the injury to Chaz Chambliss. He stepped up big with 5 tackles, a sack, 1.5 tackles for loss. UGA helped Ohio State to 2 punts, or held, Ohio State to 2 punts and 2 field goals in that second half, right? No touchdowns in that second half other than that first drive Ohio State opened up with. That's a really good performance we need to note by that Georgia defense, because that Ohio State offense was cooking. Marvin Harrison Jr.'s injury might have had something to do with that. What kind of game would that have been with Marvin Harrison Jr. still in there? I don't know. Would it have made it a factor? Well, not know, but he was really doing well and creating space and making big plays until that hit. And that was not a dirty hit, by the way. It's crazy how each fan base, and if you look, I try to look objectively, obviously. I mean, I have a bias. But if you try to look at it objectively by the rules, that was shoulder contact by Javon Bullard right when the ball got there. He's not a defenseless receiver. That is a good hit. And the people who say it's not, I have questions about their objectivity there. But what I was saying earlier about the run game kind of complimenting, Kenny McIntosh had some big plays there in the second half. It really opened up some space and helped that Georgia offense move the ball. And he could have even scored there late and taken that touchdown away from A.D. Mitchell. But the ghost of New Year's Eve leapt up and got him on the turf, right? I mean, was that the turf monster or the ghost of New Year's Eve? I don't know, because he should have scored and he just completely fell. I mean, that had to be something funny in the film room that Georgia looked at after that game. I love to be a fly on the wall for that one. But A.D. Mitchell did make the play. Stetson Bennett, great throw. I mean, that's 2 years in a row A.D. Mitchell's had a go-ahead touchdown in the playoffs. If you count the championship as a playoff. Last year versus Alabama, who scored the go-ahead touchdown? What a catch he made there. A.D. Mitchell is back. It's great to see him after missing him for 9 games this season. A play at Georgia Tech that really wasn't even a play because I think a timeout was called after he trotted out onto the field. And then in the SEC Championship, he throws a 2-point conversion to Darnell Washington, who went down, unfortunately, in the Peach Bowl. We'll talk about that in a minute and some injury updates. But A.D. Mitchell and the way he's progressed, he said he was ready in that press conference last week. He said he was ready to the media. He really looked confident when he said that, and I felt good about that. And then we see him in this game come out and really contribute and score that last touchdown to put the Dogs on top, and then the kick after that. But you couldn't have had that game without A.D., I don't think, because Ladd McConkey was out. Arian Smith really stepped up, right? And I think Mailman's arm and his deep accuracy in Arian Smith is a dynamic duo. I mean, you cannot teach 4.2 speed, boys and girls. That is crazy the way he put that DB on skates for that 76-yarder. But he had 129 yards on 3 catches, including that touchdown. And then the Mailman set the CFP record for the most passing yards in the second half in college football playoff history. Fourth quarter, 190 yards. Incredible. 3 touchdowns and a rushing score on the day for the Mailman. Can we have a Heisman revote? Because I think Stet would at least get second here. At least. I know Caleb Williams had a great game from USC, not taking anything away from Caleb Williams, and Max Duggan had a good performance too against Michigan, but the way Stetson Bennett mounted that comeback, that was incredible. And then let's get into the way this offense ended up. 533 yards of offense, 135 yards rushing, 5.2 yards per rush. So while Georgia didn't use the run game as much as it liked to because it was behind, had to pass to win, still 5.2 yards per rush. Good sign. I mean, allowed 2 sacks on the day, 7 on the year, so that's 9 now. But not bad when you're dropping back that many times, right? So, I mean, Ohio State had to create some pressure. I think Stetson Bennett's legs were huge here and kind of thwarting that pressure around and keeping the guys off of him, keeping him clean with his legs. Defense gave up 467 yards, 348 passing, 119 rushing. Only 3.7 per rush, though. So that number one rushing defense did allow, around 40 more yards than it usually does. But 3.7 yards per rush is not bad. The 348 passing, I mean, Georgia's secondary was really, it was all on them because of the pressure. We had to start creating pressure in the second half, and I think that's what made a difference or helped make the difference in the second half. The way we were creatively making that pressure, using our linebackers, using Javon Bullard, who's one of the best blitzing defensive backs in the country. You know, like I said, I lost at least 10 years off my life, and I thought we left too much time. And in the back of my mind as a Georgia sports fan, you always have to remember the games in the past. You don't have to, but you do, right? It's always creeping up the back of my mind. I knew it the entire game. I was like, nope, we don't win these games. We don't win these games. I mean, I had confidence that we were going to pull it out. I still had that glimmer of hope. But in the back of my mind, I was like, this does not look good, boys and girls. This does not look good. The way we were playing on defense, and then the second half, head coaching adjustments, coaching staff adjustments in that secondary especially. Loved it. I think that was how Georgia won. The timeout Kirby Smart took with the fake punt formation Ohio State came out in, that was huge. So I think the coaching was on Georgia's side in this game as well. And Ohio State tried to get conservative, and that ended up biting them. And Georgia's done that in the past. We know all about being conservative and having that bite us a bit. But I love the coaching moves by Kirby Smart. Crazy way to see that game end. But the way Georgia kept its cool, made plays when it needed to was special. And I think it gives the Dogs even more confidence going into this CFP championship versus TCU, right? You even however this TCU game winds up, if TCU's able to get up big early and Georgia has to kind of come back, they can think back on this game. Hey, we kept our cool. We knew what we could do. We did our assignments. We executed, and we came back and we won. If Georgia's up early and has to ride that to a win, plenty of times we've done that this year, right? Even if Georgia has a close game with TCU here, it's back and forth. We've been in those types of games. So I think the confidence level of Georgia has to be very, very high going into this game. And TCU, I told you about TCU. I told you guys about TCU for the last few weeks. I thought TCU was going to beat Michigan. 7.5-point dog. Michigan couldn't stop them. Michigan could not stop Max Duggan in that offense. And then the mistakes they made really just gifted it to them, right? You can't make that many mistakes and expect to win. And Jim Harbaugh'd again for a college football playoff loss. He's probably off to the NFL. But TCU, I think you have to keep in mind how much they can score, how much they spread the ball around, can really eat up yards with those deep passes. Max Duggan with his legs, big arm. I mean, it's going to be an interesting game to see and see if they challenge that Georgia secondary, who's been on the ropes a bit with not even just Ohio State, LSU too. LSU put up 500 yards passing. So, going to be interesting to watch. Let's get into this really quick. Not 500 yards passing, 500 yards of offense. The championship matchup, tough test for the defense, especially the D line and secondary, like I just said. And Aaron Murray had some interesting things to say about his thoughts on how this defense will get challenged. Max Duggan and how Stetson Bennett played in this Peach Bowl as well. So let's check in with the SEC's all-time leading passer, Aaron Murray. National championship. We made it again. I can't believe it. After all those years as a Georgia sports fan, and then championships are just rolling in, and hopefully the second one in a row here for the Georgia Bulldogs. And to talk this through, break it down, none other than the SEC's all-time leading passer, Aaron Murray. Aaron, thanks for taking the time. How are you doing, man?
Yeah, listen, I get for the sense of like, man, it's foreign territory to be back to back, in this title game. Obviously it's even rare territory, once Georgia wins it, to be back to back national champs. But I'm not surprised they're back this year. You see kind of the landscape of college football heading into the season. You saw what Georgia was returning on both sides of the football. And I know defensively was, somewhat gutted by the NFL last year, but you still returned, in my opinion, the best player in college football in Jalen. I thought you brought back some really impressive guys in the secondary, from Chris Smith to, Lassiter and Ringo. So you had talent on all three levels, and obviously Nolan before he got hurt. It was then just seeing what those young guys go out there and do. But the nucleus on the defense was there. The majority of the offense was back. So I was like, man, I kind of think Georgia probably can run it back, especially with their schedule. And look at where they're at right now. Big favorites to win this national championship back-to-back times.
Yeah, a huge line, right? We haven't seen a line like this in a national championship. I think it's around 13, and it seems to not be moving right now. Let's get right into it. So Stetson Bennett in that Peach Bowl, and especially in the fourth quarter, was incredible. And I'm curious on what you think from how he will be able to play against this TCU defense, especially this run game as well for Georgia, that looks to have a little bit of advantage against this Horned Frogs defense. What are you seeing, and what are your first thoughts here on Stetson Bennett in this offense and what they did in that Peach Bowl coming into this game and having to play this TCU defense?
Well, I think right now, obviously we're gonna have to wait and see what Darnell looks like, and maybe a couple others. But they're pretty healthy. I think that's the key at the moment. Like Georgia on offense is healthy. We're seeing, I think the big factor between Smith and especially AD Mitchell. Like I was so excited to see what AD Mitchell could do this season, based on kind of the way he finished last year off in the playoffs and, the big time performance against Alabama in the national championship. He looks apart. Like he looks like your number one receiver, just the size, physical strength, speed, everything. He checks a lot of boxes off, just unfortunate that he's been banged up this year. So, it was good to see him get his feet wet a little bit for LSU, but, then come out there and make some big time catches versus in that game versus Ohio State. Is like, man, okay, now we can finally see these receivers start to go out there and execute and maybe take some pressure off Bowers and the tight ends and, even the running backs, because for me, you look at Georgia's offense the past 2 years, it's been, okay, Bowers, the running backs, obviously James Cook last year, Kenny this year, and then really the receivers were really the third option in this offense. Now, when you throw AD into it and Anais, and obviously, we'll see what McConkey looks like. Now, all of a sudden, those receivers can complement the offense a little bit more, and that's just more weapons for Monken to really use. So I'm excited to see what they can do on offense this game. It's a unique defense. They've seen it, I believe, once this year. But it's just visually for a quarterback, it's a little bit tough because you get to line of scrimmage, and I faced it a couple of times. You get to line of scrimmage, and there's a lot of guys in coverage. It's essentially drop 8 for the majority of the time. You see 3 safeties, you're like, where are the holes? Where can I fit it in there? So I mean, I think the goal really, and we say this for a lot of games, but really this game especially, can you run the ball? Can you force those safeties in the box? And then from there, you hopefully can take some one-on-one chances down the field.
Yeah, and I love Stetson Bennett's legs here against that as well, right? Because if you don't have that passing lane, that passing option for you, take off, get you a slide down, get it out of bounds if you have to, keep the drive alive. Let's switch gears to the other side of the ball here, because that Georgia secondary against LSU, I know they were ahead, so LSU was really throwing the ball around a lot, but also against Ohio State, there were some holes in that defense in the secondary. There wasn't as much pressure on the inside as we're used to seeing from Georgia. They did get sacks, but, from linebackers, DBs, for the most part, beside of Michael Williams, they're getting one in. Do you think that pressure is necessary for this Georgia defense to have that secondary that can lock down people? Or do you think that secondary just had a bad game? Maybe they didn't see their cues right. What were you seeing from there? And how do you think that stacks up against TCU's offense with Max Duggan playing out of his mind?
Well, I just think right now, great offenses are going to be great defenses. I'll even go back to last year. I mean, let's go back to SEC championship game. Georgia's first real, I would say, big test against an elite quarterback paired with an elite receiver, because that's what Alabama had last year. They had an elite quarterback, and they actually had 2, I would say one elite receiver that got drafted in the first round, and obviously Mechie was tremendous as well last year, and they thumped Georgia. And then you fast forward to national championship, and they're doing their thing until, I'm talking about Alabama offensively, they're doing their thing until their top receiver goes down. So, Georgia, who knows, Georgia probably still maybe could have won that football game, probably still does, but could have been a little bit closer. Who knows? And then we go to this year, Ohio State. And I'll take a step back. Let's go to Tennessee first, because people want to talk about Tennessee. I would put Hendon as a really good quarterback, but I would put him the next tier below a Bryce and a CJ Stroud. He's kind of that one tier below him. Let's fast forward to Ohio State. Elite quarterback, elite receiver. Marvin Harrison Jr., the best receiver in America. CJ maybe the best passer right now in college football, and it's going to be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft. They go out there and they're kicking butt, maybe win that football game if Marvin Harrison is not knocked out. That's what you need to beat really, really good defenses or elite defenses, which Georgia is. Elite offenses will beat elite defenses. When I look at TCU, they have an elite receiver in Quinn Johnson. Max Duggan is I would say 2 tiers below CJ Stroud and Bryce Young. They don't have both. So if I'm Georgia, I do feel very confident that yes, you have a good quarterback. He's a heck of a leader. He's dynamic. He's a good runner. He's a good thrower of the football. He's not elite. You need both of those things, in my opinion, in order to have success against a defense like Georgia. So I'm not stressing too much about what our defense can handle going against the Horned Frogs.
And that was my next question. Does defense still win championships? Because to me, and after breaking this game down last week, is that advantage is heavily in Georgia's favor on defense. You look at TCU's defense and the way that they've allowed yards and points this year. I would just side with that. And I think that's why the line is where it's at, Yeah. And I know you got to get out. So let's go ahead and get your prediction from Aaron Murray, one of the best Georgia Bulldogs to do it, but apparently not the greatest quarterback in Georgia history, according to Aaron. I think that goes to the mailman from what I've been hearing.
Yeah.
From you at the Players Lounge.
Yeah, I was talking with Josh Brooks the other day too, and I was like, Josh, like, do we have some plans in the works right now to build a statue as soon as Georgia wins the national championship for the mailman? And he kind of just chuckles like, I'm not in charge of that. I'm like, come on, you're the athletic director. You got some say. So I think that's the real question. Like, once Georgia wins on Monday night, where's that statue going to go outside Sanford? Because I think he deserves one at this point. I mean, win 2 national championships, the story, how well he's played and especially the big time games. So I can't wait to see it. He's got a very bustable face too, Stetson. Very
square,
Greek-like. Yeah, it's very Greek-like. So I think it would look good as a statue. So go back to the score prediction. I think Georgia wins big. Like, I know you said the 13 points. I actually got it at 12.5. I got the Dogs covering at 12.5. So I'm interested to see where that fluctuates as we get closer to kickoff. But I just think they're better on both sides. They're more talented. They're more physical. Like I said, I'm not too stressed about the defense because I like Max, but I just don't think he's the type of quarterback that necessarily scares me when it comes to being extremely dynamic consistently down the field. So I think the defense will handle it just fine. So I'm looking somewhere in that like 38-21 range, somewhere in there is Dogs win and Dogs cover as well.
I like it. 38 or 30. What'd you say? 38. I already forgot.
38-21.
38-21. 38-21 from Aaron Murray. I appreciate your time, man. Guys, check him out at the Players Lounge. Got a lot of good stuff. Love what you're doing over there. You had Javon Bullard on this past week. Just watched that, and you got to check him out there, guys. And appreciate your time, Aaron. Go Dogs.
Go Dogs. Safe travels, everyone.
Really appreciate Aaron Murray for coming on and joining the show, taking the time out of his day. He's a busy guy. He jumped on a call right after we got off, so appreciate him. Let's get on to injury updates here, because this is something to watch for, and it felt like it has been all year. We've been talking about injuries, and that's the game of football, I know, but when you miss starters, it's always it's an area of concern for Dog Nation, especially when you got a guy like Big O go down. So with Darnell Washington, he's got an ankle strain, a tissue bruise. So it doesn't sound like it's a high ankle sprain, so that's good. He wasn't in a boot today. I watched a video of him getting on the bus. It looked to be walking fine. I'm not around him enough to notice these things, but did look okay walking to the bus, not in a boot. And then Chaz Chambliss, he went down with a hamstring or knee. We're not sure yet. We don't have details. I mean, Kirby Smart's not telling anything. He's just saying he's hopeful to get these guys back, right? Warren McClendon missed the start at right tackle. Amarius Mims came in, played a good game, doing an MCL strain for Warren McClendon. again, hopeful for this game. Hopefully I'll get a better update for you guys on UGA Wire, their injury report I'm about to do in a couple of days. So keep an eye out for that. Check back UGAWire.com, UGA Wire on Instagram. So I think something to watch for here as well as Robert Beal. He went down in the game. How healthy is he? Because we were already thin at edge. That's why Chaz was playing. Nolan Smith, that was his spot. Of course, out for the season with a pectoral tear. So something to watch for as well. Michael Williams, I think he stepped up in a big way. So I don't think Georgia is going to lose because of that reason. But it's something to watch for because if we lose another edge rusher, we're going to have some young guys in there that are really going to have to step up. The last injury here, Ladd McConkey did play in the Peach Bowl, but sparingly, right? So looks like that tendonitis is worse than we thought. Luckily, Arian Smith had been preparing behind Ladd, who missed a lot of practice leading up to the Peach Bowl. Arian Smith had been working his way back from injuries this year, took a more important role in Georgia's pregame prep, took more reps, and then had the best game of his career. So if Arian Smith can keep this play up, we'll be okay without Ladd, who leads Georgia in receiving. But I do love Ladd, his shiftiness out of the backfield. Arian's more of that straight line speed. Final thoughts when we'll get out of here. So, to me, I think this game really hinges on the defensive front for Georgia and that secondary. How do they complement each other? Is Georgia able to get enough pressure without blitzing from DB situation and Javon Bullard, letting him drop back in coverage instead of using him on blitzes? I think that is something to really watch against Max Duggan. I think there's going to be a lot of points here. I really do. Now, Aaron, he has a bit of a more conservative approach when it comes to TCU's offense here against this Georgia defense. I think TCU is really going to score some points, and they're going to get some big plays in. That's what type of offense they are. No one has stopped them this year from doing that. Kansas State did beat them in the Big 12 championship, but they still didn't stop them on offense, right? I think there are ways you can do that with TCU's run game. Not as developed, not as good as Ohio State's, that's for sure. Their offensive line, not as talented as Ohio State's. So can Georgia win the defensive front with Jalen Carter and Tyron Ingram-Dawkins and Zion Logue, Michael Williams in there as a freshman? Oh, freshman All-American teams. ESPN named Malachi Starks and Michael Williams to the All-American teams for freshmen. So congrats to those guys. And this is going to be a bright defense down the road, right? With these young freshmen who are really talented and already performing at a high level, at the top level of college football, right? That's a good sign. That's a good sign. But got off track there. Georgia, TCU, I think that defensive line, secondary for Georgia, something to watch. I don't think TCU can stop Georgia on offense, and I think that's why the line is so big here. Their defense, 92nd in run defense. I think that's where Georgia can really establish the run, like I was saying earlier. And then as far as the Georgia passing attack that has been so potent, A.D. Mitchell, Arian Smith, their additions and the way they've been able to recover and come back and contribute in this offense is huge. That's why we saw the big plays that we did last week and the clutch performance from Stetson Bennett. He only benefits from Arian Smith and A.D. Mitchell back. Great route running from Mitchell. I think it's one of the big things that he does well. High points footballs, great hands. And then Brock Bowers had a great game. I think he's second on the team in receiving in that game, 67 yards, I believe. Big-time catches in clutch moments. Brock is always someone you can rely on, so he is good to go, even without Darnell. I think Georgia does establish the run in this game early, and I think that defensive line is able to get some pressure. They complement one another, right? You get stops on defense, that run game takes over, field position, time off the clock for Georgia, and I think they cruise to a win that way. Big stops in the second half of that Georgia defense. That said, watch for, if they can start the run game off early with Georgia, who is that guy who steps up blocking? Do they use Brock Bowers more in blocking sets? Do they bring Oscar Delp in, let him run routes, or use them both that way? I'm not really sure because Darnell Washington, that's what he does so well. He basically is a tackle out there at tight end. No one blocks at the tight end position like Big O. So that's something that Georgia could be missing, but it'll be interesting to watch. I don't think TCU has the defense to be able to match up size for size, speed for speed, and be able to stop this Georgia offense. Opposite side, Georgia has that defense that is really talented. Can they recover and play better in the secondary and defensive line this game? I think they do. I like points, guys. I think the over-under is 63. I would take the over. Give me Georgia 45, TCU 31. 45-31. Georgia covers, brings home another national title. 2 in a row. 2 in a row, baby. Thanks so much for listening, guys. Really appreciate it. If you're listening on the podcast, please rate, subscribe, review. If you're on YouTube, subscribe, hit that like button, please. Get this channel up and going. Excited to bring another video next week to you guys. And I'm really thinking it's going to be another celebration. Celebration part 2. Tune in next week. Georgia will get the win here in SoFi Stadium in LA. Go Dogs. Safe travels.